Here, drink this.
Thank you. That's better.
Good.
Stay with me.
The insult landed before Amira even opened her eyes. She'd been drifting, that shallow, exhausted sleep that new mothers know, where you're never fully under because some animal part of your brain stays alert for the cry. The twins were 41 days old. 41 days of leaking, bleeding, shrinking, swelling in ways nobody warned her about. 41 days of watching Jin come home at 2 a.m., shower, slide into bed beside her without touching her. She heard him before she saw him, heard the pause, heard the specific quality of silence that comes from a man starring. "Jiangmul," he said quietly, "really?" She opened her eyes. Jin was standing at the foot of the bed in his charcoal suit, tie loosened, holding a glass of scotch. He was looking at her the way he sometimes looked at a deal gone sideways, like something that had promised value and failed to deliver. "You're fat and ugly now," he said, not shouting, almost curious. "Both." Amira sat up slowly. She was wearing a nursing bra 2 sizes bigger than anything she'd owned before, a pair of his old sweatpants, her locks pulled back in a wrap she'd thrown on at midnight during the second feeding. Her stomach was soft where it had been taut. Her face was different, not unbeautiful, not ruined, just changed asterisk, the way all bodies change when they've performed the impossible. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Get out of the room." Jin blinked. He wasn't used to that. In the 2 years she'd been his wife, she had argued with him, challenged him, thrown a plate at him once, a very good throw, but she had never used that voice. Flat, final, like something closing. "Amira." "Out." He left. She wasn't sure who was more surprised. She hadn't come to Seoul looking for a Mafia boss. She'd come for a residency. Amira was a sculptor, real sculpture, the kind that came from 2 years at Accra Fine Arts, a semester in Paris, and a stubborn refusal to make anything that didn't cost her something physical. She worked in metal and wood. She had calluses. She had opinions. She had a graduate fellowship that brought her to the Hongdae Arts District on a gray October morning with 2 suitcases and a portable torch. She met Jin because he owned the building. Not in any obvious way. The studio space was listed under a property management company, and the property management company was one of 14 shells that eventually connected, if you were the kind of person who followed those things, to Kim Yi-hyun Jin, known in certain Seoul circles simply as Sajang Nim *, the boss. But Amira didn't know any of that in October. She just knew that when the heating broke in week 2, the man who showed up to handle it personally was too young, too well-dressed, and too unsettlingly calm to be any kind of maintenance worker. "The pipe is frozen," he said, crouching near the floor vent with his suit jacket still on. "I know the pipe is frozen," she said. "I called 3 days ago." "I know." He stood, looked at her work, the half-finished piece she'd been welding, a woman's torso emerging from twisted rebar, arms raised, head thrown back. "This is good." "I know," she said again. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that knew it was dangerous and deployed itself carefully. His name was Jin. He didn't offer a last name. He came back the next week with the heating fixed and no real excuse for being there, and she let him in because she was curious and because loneliness in a foreign city is its own kind of gravity. By December, she knew he wasn't normal rich. By January, she knew what not normal * meant, had seen the men outside his car, the calls he stepped away to take, the moment at a restaurant when a man approached their table and Jin looked at him once and the man actually stumbled backward. She should have left. She didn't leave. She told herself it was the realness of him. Jin had no performance. He didn't try to seem softer than he was, didn't pretend his world was something she could live comfortably adjacent to. "I am what I am," he said one night, and she'd laughed because it was such a ridiculous thing to say with such complete seriousness. "So am I," she said. They got married 7 months later in a ceremony that his mother did not attend, and her mother watched on video call with an expression that was equal parts pride, terror, and "Amira Surwa Mensa, what have you done?" The twins came a year after the wedding, a boy and a girl. Seo and Nana, her compromise and his. She'd cried when she chose the names. He hadn't cried, but she'd seen something move across his face in the delivery room, something that didn't have a word yet. She thought that moment meant something. She thought a lot of things meant something. She didn't sleep after he left the room. She lay in the dark, listening to the twins breathe through the monitor, running his words back through her head. Fat and ugly now? Both. She kept waiting for the anger to arrive and carry her somewhere useful. Instead, something colder settled in. She picked up her phone, opened her camera, turned it to face herself in the dark and really looked at the woman on the screen. Light brown skin with no sleep under it, jaw softer, eyes that had watched two humans enter the world and hadn't stopped watching since. She was not ugly. She knew that clearly, the way you know a fact. What she didn't know yet, what she was only beginning to understand as she set the phone down, was that Jin's cruelty tonight had not been random. Jin was never random. He was afraid of something. And he'd just made a catastrophic mistake in letting her see it. She found the envelope 3 days later. Not by snooping. Amira had never been the kind of wife who checked phones or followed paper trails. She found it because Seo wouldn't stop screaming at 4 a.m., and she'd carried him to the kitchen for warm water. And the envelope was sitting on the counter in a house where Jin's staff ensured nothing was ever simply asterisk sitting anywhere. White, unmarked, already opened. She should have left it. She picked it up. Inside was a single photograph. A woman, Korean, stunning in the architectural way of someone who has spent real money on herself, cheekbones you could balance something on, a body that had clearly never fed two humans simultaneously. She was standing outside what Amira recognized, after a moment, as the Lot Hotel. The photo was dated 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks ago, Amira had been 35 weeks pregnant, enormous and slow, and Jin had been in Busan for what he called business consolidation. She put the photograph back, put the envelope exactly where she'd found it, brought Seo his warm water, sat in the nursing chair, and stared at nothing while her son drank and her daughter slept. She did not cry. She thought. Jin came home at a reasonable hour for the first time in weeks, 7 p.m., carrying food from the Japanese place she'd mentioned once, 3 months ago. She hadn't thought he'd remembered. The fact that he had made everything slightly worse. "I want to apologize," he said, setting containers on the kitchen island, not looking at her. Jin apologized the way some men parallel park, with great concentration, refusing to be watched. "For which part?" she asked. He looked up. "What I said, the night what I said was," he stopped, started again. "It was wrong." Amira studied him. He was still the most symmetrical person she'd ever seen in real life. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that processed everything slightly faster than seemed fair, a mouth that almost never said what it was actually saying. She'd found that quality magnetic once. Right now, it made her want to press on something until it cracked. "Where were you in Busan?" she asked. Nothing changed in his face. That was its own answer. "Business." "Which business?" "Amira." "Which business, Jin?" He closed the food containers slowly. "You know I don't bring work home." "You brought something home," she said. "Or someone sent it, the envelope on the counter." 3 seconds of silence. She counted them. "That was nothing," he said. "She's beautiful," Amira said, and her voice came out so even it surprised even her. "I want you to know I noticed that. I'm not going to pretend I didn't." Jin set both palms flat on the island. He opened his mouth. Then his phone rang, the second phone, the one she was never supposed to acknowledge, and his jaw tightened, and he looked at her with something she couldn't name and said, "Don't touch anything in my office." Then he walked out. She stood in the kitchen with 6 containers of Japanese food, going cold, and understood that she had just been handed 2 things simultaneously, a warning and a location. She waited 4 days. Long enough for him to relax, long enough to establish a pattern. She was up with the twins, she was sleeping when she could, she was not a threat. His guard, Tiong, stopped tracking her movements around the house the way he had in the first weeks. The housekeeper, Mrs. O, started leaving her alone in the kitchen. Even Jin seemed to settle into something that resembled normalcy, coming home, eating with her, touching the twins with that terrifying gentleness that men like him sometimes have. All that controlled violence redirected into something that won't break. She watched all of it. She filed all of it. On the fourth night, when Jin was at whatever 2 a.m. thing required him at 2 a.m., Amira put the twins down, waited 20 minutes, and went into his office. She wasn't looking for proof of the woman. She didn't need more of that. She was looking for what was behind the cruelty because she'd meant what she'd thought that first night. Jin had been afraid. She knew his face. She knew the difference between contempt and fear, wearing contempt as a coat. The office was locked. She'd known it would be. She'd also watched him unlock it 11 times in the past 4 days, and Jin had a habit she'd noticed early in their marriage. He always used his left thumb, and he always tilted his head slightly right before entering a code, like he was hearing it instead of remembering it. She'd seen the keypad enough times to know it had 6 digits. She tried Seo and Nana's birthday first. It opened. She stood very still for a moment, surprised despite herself that he'd done something so human. Inside, the desk was clean. The shelves held books she'd seen him actually read, and a few she suspected were decorative. She went straight to the filing cabinet because it was the only thing in the room that was locked with a key, which meant it held something he didn't want found quickly. She found the key taped behind the second shelf. He'd always underestimated her spatial memory. The cabinet had 3 drawers. The first 2 held what she expected: documents, contracts in Korean she could partially read, transfers between entities she didn't recognize. The third drawer held a single folder. Inside the folder, her name. Her full name, Amira Surwa Mensakim *, on what appeared to be a legal document. Beside it, a letter in Korean with a red stamp at the bottom. And beneath both of those, a photograph she had never seen. Herself, arriving at Seoul Incheon Airport, 2 years ago, October. Before she'd ever met Jin. She turned it over, on the back in Jin's handwriting. Day 1, asset confirmed. The floor didn't move. The room didn't spin. Amira stood in her husband's locked office at 2 a.m., 45 days after giving birth to his children, and felt something she had no previous reference for. She'd thought she was a wife who'd married a dangerous man. She was beginning to understand she might be something else entirely. She took photos of everything with her phone, put the folder back, locked the cabinet, replaced the key, left the office exactly as she'd found it. Then she went and fed Nana, who had started crying with extraordinary timing, and sat in the dark deciding what kind of woman she was going to be from this moment forward. By the time Nana was back asleep, she'd decided. She called her mother at 6 a.m. Not to tell her everything. Amira had been protecting her mother from everything since her father left when she was 9, a habit so old it had calcified into instinct. She called because she needed to hear a voice that had known her before Seoul, before Jin, before she'd become someone's asset confirmed. "You sound tired," her mother said immediately. Adwoa Mensa had a gift for stating the obvious with the precision of a diagnosis. "I have twins, Mama." "You sound a different kind of tired." Amira closed her eyes. "I'm okay." "Amira Surwa. I'll call you this weekend. Kiss Auntie Fua for me." She hung up before her mother could press further. Then she sat with the phone in her hands and thought about the word asset for a long time. Assets were acquired. Assets were managed. Assets had value that someone had calculated before purchase. She opened her phone and did something she'd been putting off since the envelope. She Googled Jin's full name. Not the surface results she'd skimmed before they married, the ones that returned nothing alarming because the alarming things were buried. She dug. She used the Korean she'd spent 18 months quietly learning, better than Jin knew she could. Another thing she'd kept close, another card she'd never placed face up on the table. What she found took 2 hours and rearranged everything. Jin wasn't just a mafia boss in the operational sense she'd understood, running protection, managing territory, the organized crime architecture she'd mentally filed and chosen to live beside. He was something more structural than that. The name Kim Yi-hyun appeared in a 2019 investigative piece buried in a small digital outlet that had since gone offline. She found the cached version, connected to a network that moved people. Not drugs, not weapons. People. Specifically, the piece alleged foreign nationals brought into South Korea under cultural and academic programs. Artists, researchers, people with legitimate credentials and clean records who passed through immigration without flags, then found themselves in situations they hadn't agreed to. She read it 3 times. Then she thought about a fellowship that had arrived in her inbox, unsolicited, from an organization she'd never applied to, offering a studio in Seoul. She had thought she was chosen for her talent. She'd told herself that without examination, because being chosen for your talent is what you hope for your whole life, and hope has a way of making you incurious. She put the phone down, picked it up, put it down again. Across the hall, Seo made a small sound, not a cry, just the soft announcement of consciousness. She went to him automatically, lifted him. He smelled like warmth and something sweet that had no name, and she pressed her face into his neck and stood there for a moment that had nothing to do with any of it. Whatever she was to Jin, these 2 were hers. That was not an asset calculation. That was a fact older than paperwork. She was still carrying Seo when Jin came home at 8 a.m., which meant he hadn't slept, which meant whatever 2 a.m. thing had called him had extended into morning. He stopped when he saw her standing in the hallway. "You're up," he said. "Always," she said. She smiled at him. She had decided in the nursing chair at 5 a.m. that she would become, for now, unreadable. She had watched him be unreadable for 2 years. She had studied the architecture of it, the stillness, the mild expression, the way he asked questions by not asking them. She was a fast learner. It was, apparently, documented. "Are you hungry?" she asked. He looked at her for a moment too long. "You're cooking." "I was going to, unless Mrs. O comes early." Something shifted in his face, relief, maybe, that she was behaving normally. It almost made her feel sorry for him. Almost. "I'll eat," he said. She made eggs and rice the way he liked. Seo propped in the little seat on the counter watching her with his enormous, serious eyes. And she chatted about the twins, Nana's new habit of grabbing her own feet, Seo's expression during his bath that looked distinctly offended, and she watched Jin relax degree by degree as breakfast continued. He wanted this. She could see it clearly now in a way she hadn't before. He wanted the domestic version of her, the contained, softened, postpartum version who was too tired to look closely at anything. The cruelty that first night hadn't been casual. It had been a test. He'd wanted her wounded and retreating. She served him his plate and sat across from him and said pleasantly, "Who is she?" Jin's chopsticks paused over his rice. "The woman in the photograph," Amira continued, same pleasant tone. "I'm not asking to fight. I'm asking because I think I deserve a name. We can be adult about this." He set the chopsticks down. "Where did you find?" "The counter," she said. "It was on the counter, Jin. I wasn't looking for it." He was quiet for a long moment. Seo blew a small bubble and broke the silence in the most absurd possible way. "Her name is Park Sujin," Jin said finally. "It's not what you think." "What do I think?" "That she's," he stopped. "It's complicated." "Most things with you are complicated," she said. "Let's uncomplicate it." He looked at her across the table, and for the first time she saw something she recognized as genuine discomfort. Not guilt. She didn't think Jin processed guilt the way ordinary people did, but discomfort. Like a man who had built a room and was suddenly uncertain of the walls. "Sujin is the daughter of Chairman Park," he said. Amira knew the name. She'd found it twice in her morning research. Park Disung, the legitimate face of an empire that overlapped with Jin's in ways the investigative piece had only gestured at. "He wants an alliance," Jin said. "Through her?" "Yes." "A marriage alliance," Amira said. Jin said nothing, which was Korean for *yes. She nodded slowly, picked up her coffee, drank it, put the cup down. "And what am I in that scenario?" she asked. He met her eyes, And in the space between his expression and his answer, she saw it again, the fear. Raw this time, uncoded. "I need more time," he said. It was not an answer. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her in 45 days. She smiled again, the new smile, the unreadable one. "Take your time," she said. "We're not going anywhere." She meant it as comfort. She could see he heard it as a threat. Good. She was only beginning to understand how much power lived in the space between those two things. That afternoon, while Jin slept, she made a phone call she'd been turning over in her mind since 5 a.m. The number belonged to a man named Kwon, a journalist, the same one whose byline had appeared on the cached investigative piece that no longer existed online. She'd found a contact email through 3 layers of searching, sent a message, and had a number returned within the hour, which told her Kwon had been waiting for exactly this kind of call. "Mrs. Kim," he said when she answered. "Don't call me that," she said. A pause. "What should I call you?" She looked down at Nana, who had fallen asleep on her chest. "Call me a source," she said, "and tell me what you know about the fellowship program." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that she thought he might hang up. Then Kwon exhaled slowly and said, "How much time do you have?" From down the hall came the sound of Jin's alarm. He'd set it for 2 hours. She knew his rhythms, and she looked toward the bedroom door and back down at her daughter's sleeping face. "Not enough," she said, "but let's start."